It's the year 1100, and the body of King William Rufus is being carried back to Winchester. His sudden death while hunting in the New Forest has left England without a king. William was fatally struck by an arrow while hunting. Whether it was an accident or an assassination has been debated for centuries. Some claim it was a mere hunting mishap, while others believe there were darker forces at play. Henry, the youngest son of William the Conqueror, was also in the New Forest that day. Upon hearing the news of his brother's death, Henry acted swiftly and rode to Winchester. When Henry reached Winchester, his goal was simple: secure the royal crown. Though his elder brother Robert Curthose was technically next in line, he was far away, still returning from the First Crusade. Henry wasted no time. 2 days after William's death, he was crowned King Henry I of England at Westminster Abbey. The coronation of Henry marked the beginning of a new chapter for England. Born in 1068, possibly in the town of Selby in Yorkshire, Henry was the fourth son of William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, who had famously invaded England in 1066 to become its king. This conquest reshaped the political landscape and also created an Anglo-Norman ruling class, with estates and loyalties stretching across the English Channel. Henry's mother, Matilda of Flanders, was of royal blood herself. She was the granddaughter of King Robert II of France, and likely named Henry after her uncle, Henry I of France. Unlike his older brothers, who were more focused on military pursuits, Henry had a different upbringing. Educated in Latin and law, he was known for his intelligence, earning the nickname Henry Beauclerc or Henry the Scholar. In 1087, William the Conqueror was fatally injured during a campaign in the Vexin. As his life slipped away, his three surviving sons, Hugh-Bert, William Rufus, and Henry gathered by his side. Robert the eldest inherited Normandy, while William Rufus, who was in favor with their father, received England. Henry, though the youngest, received a substantial sum of money, often reported as £5,000, a fortune that would later prove essential in his rise to power. When Robert returned to Normandy, he expected to inherit both the duchy and the English crown. However, William Rufus had already crossed the Channel and been crowned. This caused friction between the brothers. Robert soon began planning an invasion of England to reclaim the throne. During this time, Henry stayed in Normandy and played a relatively passive role within Robert's court. But William Rufus seized Henry's estates in England, leaving him without land and in a vulnerable position. In 1088, when Robert's invasion plans started to falter due to internal strife and lack of support, he turned to Henry for financial help, asking for a portion of Henry's inheritance. Initially, Henry refused, but the two brothers reached an alternative agreement. In exchange for £3,000, Robert would make Henry the Count of Western Normandy, giving him control over valuable land and furthering his position in Norman politics. As Count of Western Normandy, Henry quickly established a power base. He built a network of followers, drawing support from both Western Normandy and neighboring Brittany. During this period, neither William nor Robert seems to have fully trusted Henry, as Henry demonstrated independence by refusing to financially support Robert's invasion, and now as a rising power in Normandy, both brothers saw him as a potential threat. In July 1088, Henry returned to England. The rebellion against William Rufus had settled, and Henry sought an audience with his brother, hoping to regain the estates of their mother, Matilda of Flanders. But William Rufus, cautious of Henry's growing influence, refused his request. Frustrated, Henry returned to Normandy that autumn, ready to continue building his power base. However, while he was away, a dangerous plot was brewing against him. Odo, Bishop of Bayeux and a key figure in Norman politics, had long regarded Henry as a rival. Seizing on the opportunity presented by Henry's absence, Odo convinced Robert that Henry was conspiring against him with William Rufus. Fearing a potential alliance between his two younger brothers, Robert took swift action. Upon Henry's return to Normandy, Odo had him arrested and imprisoned, and Robert seized back the county of Cotentin. While Robert may have acted impulsively, the Norman nobility recognized the value of keeping the peace. Senior nobles who had grown sympathetic to Henry urged Robert to release his younger brother. Their pressure worked, and by spring Henry was freed, but had lost his lands and title. Although no longer formally the Count of Cotentin, Henry continued to control the west of Normandy. After his release from prison, Henry's relationship with Robert remained strained. Tensions boiled over when Henry requested to be formally reinstated as Count of the Cotentin, a request Robert refused. In response, Robert forced Henry to leave Rouen, but while Henry bided his time, fate would soon present him with the perfect opportunity to seize power. On the afternoon of August 2, 1100, King William Rufus set out on a hunting expedition in the New Forest, accompanied by a group of trusted nobles, including Henry. An arrow, possibly shot by the Baron Walter Tyrrell, hit and killed William Rufus. Many conspiracy theories have been put forward, suggesting that the king was killed deliberately. Amid the chaos, Tyrrell fled the scene, escaping to France, either out of guilt for the fatal shot or out of fear that he would be scapegoated for the king's death. Henry immediately mounted his horse and raced to Winchester. With William Rufus dead and Robert still far away in Normandy, Henry seized his moment. Upon arriving at Winchester, Henry gathered enough support to claim the throne. On August 5, 1100, just 3 days after William Rufus's death, Henry was crowned King of England at Winchester Cathedral. To secure his rule, Henry issued the Charter of Liberties, a document that promised to reform the abuses of his brother's reign and restore order to the kingdom. On November 11, 1100, Henry solidified his position as King of England by marrying Matilda, daughter of Malcolm III of Scotland, in a grand ceremony at Westminster Abbey. Matilda, originally named Edith, was of noble Anglo-Saxon heritage, a descendant of the West Saxon royal line, including Edmund Ironside and Alfred the Great. For Henry, this marriage brought invaluable political benefits. By wedding into a line that was deeply tied to England's Anglo-Saxon past, Henry reinforced his legitimacy as king. Matilda quickly proved to be an effective partner to Henry in both governance and the promotion of the arts. She often acted as regent when Henry was away, presiding over councils and making crucial decisions in his absence. Henry and Matilda had 2 children. In 1102, their daughter Matilda was born, followed by the birth of their son and heir, William Adelin, in 1103. With a male heir now in place, Henry's dynasty seemed secure. By early 1101, Henry's new regime in England was up and running, but his rule was far from secure. Many of the Anglo-Norman elite still viewed his elder brother Robert as the rightful heir. In July, Robert gathered an army and a fleet ready to launch an invasion and reclaim the English throne. Henry, aware of the danger, mobilized his forces, positioning them near Pevensey on the southern coast, where he expected Robert to land. He even trained his men personally, preparing them for the cavalry charges they would face in battle. But Robert surprised Henry by landing not at Pevensey, but further up the coast at Portsmouth, with a relatively small force of a few hundred men. Despite his limited numbers, Robert's arrival sparked a wave of support from Anglo-Norman barons still loyal to him. Henry acted swiftly, leading his army west to intercept Robert before he could gather even more support. The 2 armies met near Alton in Hampshire. With tensions high and both sides ready for battle, something unexpected happened. Instead of clashing on the battlefield, peace negotiations began. Historians are unsure who initiated the talks, whether it was Henry, Robert, or their respective barons, but it was clear that neither side wanted to risk a bloody conflict. After days of negotiation, the 2 brothers came to an agreement known as the Treaty of Alton. Under its terms, Robert officially recognized Henry as the rightful king of England. In return, Henry renounced his claims to western Normandy and agreed to pay Robert an annual pension of £2,000 for life. The treaty also included a clause that if either brother died without a male heir, the other would inherit his lands. Though the Treaty of Alton brought temporary peace between Henry and Robert, the truce was always fragile. Henry's hold over England was secure, but his ambitions stretched beyond the English Channel. Normandy, still under Robert's rule, remained a prize that Henry coveted, and the barons on both sides of the Channel were restless, some still loyal to Robert, others hedging their bets between the 2 brothers. While Robert struggled to manage his duchy, Henry took advantage of his brother's weaknesses. He slowly built alliances with disaffected Norman nobles, undermining Robert's rule. Henry crossed into Normandy, using both military and diplomatic means to erode his brother's power. The stage was set for a final confrontation between the 2 brothers and the battle that would decide the fate of Normandy. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Tinchebray on September 28, 1106. Henry led an army composed of English and Norman forces, along with key allies from Brittany and Maine. Robert, on the other hand, had only a fragmented force of Norman loyalists. The Battle of Tinchebray was fought on a plateau near the town of Tinchebray in western Normandy. Henry's army outnumbered Robert's, and the king had meticulously planned his strategy, using his superior numbers and disciplined troops to his advantage. The battle was brief but decisive. Henry's army overwhelmed Robert's forces, breaking their lines and routing many of his soldiers. In the chaos, Robert himself fought bravely, but his army collapsed around him. As his troops fled the field, Robert was captured along with many of his key supporters. Among the prisoners was Edgar Atheling, the last direct male heir of the Anglo-Saxon royal family, who'd been a supporter of Robert. With Robert's defeat, Henry had finally won the long struggle for Normandy. The Battle of Tinchebray marked a turning point in Henry's reign. With his brother captured, Henry quickly moved to consolidate his hold over Normandy. Robert was imprisoned first in England and later in Wales, where he would remain for the rest of his life. Normandy was now firmly in Henry's hands, uniting it with England under his rule. The Anglo-Norman realm that his father William the Conqueror had envisioned was now a reality, with Henry as the undisputed ruler. Henry I was not only a formidable warrior, but a shrewd diplomat. His reign saw him skillfully balancing power between England and Normandy, but Henry also sought to secure his legacy through strategic marriages. In 1108, he arranged a powerful alliance by marrying his only legitimate daughter, Matilda, to Henry V, the Holy Roman Emperor. This marriage elevated Matilda to empress, strengthening Henry's ties to one of the most powerful monarchies in Europe. Henry's plans for the future seemed secure. But in 1120, tragedy struck. White ship, carrying many members of the Anglo-Norman elite, including Henry's only legitimate son and heir, William Adelin, was sunk. The ship, known for its speed, was overcrowded, and the crew had been drinking. The ship hit submerged rocks and quickly began to sink. Most of the passengers, including William, drowned. The White Ship disaster was a catastrophic blow for Henry I. The loss of his only son left the king without a male heir, throwing his plans for the succession into chaos. With no surviving legitimate sons, Henry was left with only one option, his daughter Matilda. In 1125, Matilda's husband, Emperor Henry V, died, leaving her a widow. The following year, Henry recalled Matilda to England, recognizing her as his only hope for a stable succession. He then declared Matilda his rightful heir, and barons were summoned to swear an oath of allegiance to her. Henry's hopes for a peaceful succession rested on Matilda's ability to hold the kingdom together. But when Henry died in 1135 while in Normandy, the kingdom, instead of following his plans, spiraled into chaos. Despite his efforts to secure Matilda's succession, many of the barons now rejected the idea of a female ruler. Seizing the moment, Henry's nephew, Stephen of Blois, crossed the Channel to England. With the support of key nobles, he swiftly had himself crowned king in London, usurping Matilda's claim and setting the stage for a catastrophic civil war. The civil war that followed became known as the Anarchy, a period of brutal conflict and lawlessness. England descended into chaos as Stephen and Matilda fought for control of the crown. The barons, split between loyalty to Stephen and Matilda, further fractured the kingdom. Castles were besieged, towns were looted, and famine and suffering swept the land. England stood on the brink of disaster as the once strong Anglo-Norman kingdom fractured. For nearly 2 decades, the land was ravaged by war, with no clear victor in sight.